Well, welcome to the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, I've got Devan McConnell, who is the Arizona Coyotes High Performance Director. He's been in the NHL for several years now and has grown up with hockey, and we're going to talk all about what it takes to keep those NHL players at peak performance, as well as how does it work to just coordinate all these professionals behind the scenes. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Click that subscribe button and enjoy the show.
Where did you grow up? What town?
So I grew up in Seattle, or just outside Seattle.
And then
I went to school in Mass at Fitchburg State. And that's where my wife and I met, and then worked at at Stanford first. Was my first kind of real gig out of college, and then came back and worked at Lowell for about 9 years. Yeah.
Okay, I gotta ask, Seattle, you obviously got so many colleges and universities on the West Coast, but Fitchburg State, I mean, that's just, I've been to Fitchburg State. It's kind of like, Worcester State in a way, or Worcester State, I don't know. It's just one of the smaller ones. So.
Well, there's no college hockey on the West Coast. So for me, like wanting to play college hockey, it was, basically Minnesota or New England. And for whatever reason, growing up, I was always fascinated or kind of wanted to play at Boston University. I wasn't good enough to play at BU, but I knew I wanted to be in kind of the Boston area. So Fitchburg happened to be, of all the schools that I kind of was recruited by or talked to, it was the best opportunity to play right away, just from what their roster looked like. So I had a good shot to, not sit on the bench too long and play. And just happened to have exercise science. I didn't choose the school for that. I could have ended up anywhere else and would have gone into business or, finance or something else, but happened to have exercise science. And I'd always been kind of interested in training. Towards the end of my junior career, I was banged up and beat up. So I was in physical therapy a bunch and really kind of enjoyed learning about the human body going through that process. So I thought that I wanted to be a physical therapist. Didn't really know that strength and conditioning was a thing, that it existed really as a field. So ended up at Fitchburg State, again, just purely because it was the best chance to play right away, but they happened to have exercise science. So I started taking that, again, thinking that I was going to go into physical therapy, and kind of went down that path and realized that I was much more interested in, training healthy athletes than I was sort of the rehab setting. And that's how I kind of fell into this field.
Very cool. Okay. Obviously you're with the Coyotes now, and but growing up, what was your team? And you didn't have the Seattle Kraken yet, right? Who was your team growing up?
Yeah, so probably my favorite player. So I was a goalie. So my favorite player was Felix Potvin, who was the goaltender for the Toronto Maple Leafs for a long time. So I liked the Leafs mostly because I liked him. But then it was also the era of Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr with the Penguins. So I kind of grew up a Penguins fan because they were really good and they were fun to watch, and obviously some of the best players in the world. So it was kind of a Leafs Penguins kind of back and forth growing up.
Oh, all right. Penguins leave a thorn in my side. I was at Game 6 of the Stanley Cup against the Sharks in San Jose when Penguins won a few years ago. So we'll just move past that. So you spent obviously time in the college ranks, Fitchburg State, graduate there, and then you head out west to Stanford. How did that work?
Yeah, well, a little prior to that, I guess kind of the middle ground is my career really started. I started as an intern and then working for Mike Boyle at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. So Mike is very much my mentor, and now is a very good friend. But my career started there with him, under him. And so I was, kind of in that setting for parts of, the end of my college career as I started to do internship type work. And then the following kind of year, spent time working for him. And then my first, quote unquote, real gig, I guess, outside of that kind of full-time job was working at Stanford University. So I was just right place, right time, right connection to end up out there working with women's basketball and men's and women's volleyball, and spent about 3 years in Palo Alto working on the farm for the Cardinal, and just learning a ton. I worked under a guy named Brandon Marcello, who was just fantastic, and again, another person that continues to be a mentor and a good friend of mine. So I was there for about 3 years, but always wanted to get back to hockey. Always knew I wanted to be kind of in hockey once I went down this route into performance training. And was fortunate enough to spend some time with Mike Potenza, who I know you know there, with the San Jose Sharks. So while I was at Stanford, I kind of interned, whatever you want to call it, for Mike, to keep my foot in the door and kind of get my foot in the door into the pro hockey world. And then opportunity arose at UMass Lowell, and it was a chance to get into college hockey, and get back to the New England area where I went to school and my wife is from. And it's kind of home at this point. And so got back to UMass Lowell and was fortunate there to start with a brand new head coach with the hockey program. And he really, Norm Bazin is his name, and he's really done amazing things with that program. So I kind of rolled the roller coaster up for about 9 years at Lowell, and really started off things really well there.
Wow. All right, you hit 3 of my former guests already. Mike Potenza. I've had Mike on a couple times, actually, because he just took the head strength coach or head performance director for Golden State Warriors, leaving the Sharks for after 17, 18 years or so. And then Brandon Marcello. Yeah, we were actually hanging out last, was it June, with Perform Better down in Orlando, and we spent some time together just chatting. And gosh, he asked such great questions that it shook the foundations of what I believe, right? So I love when those things happen. It's not the most comfortable feeling but when things start settling down, you just reinforce certain things and bring up questions of others. And of course, Mike Boyle, I had him where I replayed a conversation I had with Mike, because he was my very first guest on the Zealous podcast a couple of years back. But one thing that Mike was mentioning is his kind of the selection for hiring and selecting people. I'm curious though, Devan, what was the way in which you interviewed for a position there? Because if it was cut and dry, you didn't get the spot. So I'm curious.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. So while I was at Fitchburg as a student, I had a summer job working in the rec center. I just kind of sat there for 6 hours a day and wiped down equipment. And what it allowed me to do was kind of sit on the computer, and get online and learn and research. And so what happened is I had been kind of looking at bios of strength and conditioning coaches in college athletics, just trying to learn who people were and reach out or whatever. And there was a woman at BU at the time, strength and conditioning coach by the name of Darcy Kellum. Darcy, it might have been Darcy Gould at the time, Darcy Kellum, as she got married. She had just kind of a similar background to myself. So I just cold emailed, reached out to her and said, I'm a student. I'm not far away. I'd love to, pick your brain. And she got back to me right away, and said, hey, come on down, drive down to Boston, hour away, and we'll have coffee and talk shop. And I got there, and she kind of showed me around and showed me the BU weight room and talking about stuff. And, I asked her if they did internships, because I was looking for an internship the next year. And she said, well, we do, but, our summer is not very busy. Most of the college athletes go home. You should really talk to Mike Boyle. That's where you want to intern. And I knew who Mike was, but I didn't know him. And she's like, well, give him a call, and talk to him. So same thing. I think I either called or emailed, and she had kind of connected us. And he said, yeah, why don't you come down and you can watch us, watch me train the hockey team, and we'll talk or whatever. So I went down, and he let me, just sort of be a fly on the wall and watch him train the BU team at the time. And at the end of that, he kind of asked me, he's like, well, what are you doing this summer? And I said, I'm looking for an internship. I'm not sure. And he said, well, why didn't you apply to mine? I said, that's way over my head. I couldn't imagine, working for you at this point. And he said, well, if you want an internship, we start, next Monday or whatever. So he kind of felt me out a little bit, had me come down, check me out, talk to me a little bit, see what I was all about. We had interacted online a few times, but yeah, and then he kind of offered me that opportunity, and I obviously jumped on it, and kind of away we went. So that was kind of the story. So it was all thanks to Darcy Kellum for setting that up 20 years ago.
That's it. It all comes to friends and networking, who you know, and taking the opportunity. That's very cool. So you go west, you come back east, and then how does it happen that you go to UMass Lowell? By the way, you made a comment when we were talking off the air about me going to UMass Amherst and you at UMass Lowell, and you guys don't think very kindly of folks from UMass Amherst. Is that how it is?
It's a friendly rivalry, I guess. It's a friendly rivalry. Early years when I was there, we had the best of you guys in hockey, and I think that turned a little bit when you guys had some successful years as well. So, but it's a good little rivalry.
I see. Okay, now I get it. Yeah. UMass Amherst. We didn't have a hockey team actually when I was going there, and it only happened a little bit later after I left. And yeah, they went on kind of a nice little roll for a little while. But yeah, but we're all in the same family. I'm not gonna point to anything there. But you were at UMass Lowell, and then is that from there you go to New Jersey and work for the Red Devils?
Yeah, so I like I said, I spent about 9 years at UMass Lowell, and my role kind of morphed and shifted over that period of time, but was primarily with the hockey team the entire time. And then yeah, that was I basically from after that 9-year period, it wasn't like it was 1 year in, 1 year out, but there for a long time, and then was fortunate enough to have an opportunity with the New Jersey Devils. So I moved down there and worked for them for what felt like a decade, but was really only about a year because of COVID. It was right through the middle of that. And then another opportunity kind of arose, and moved out to Arizona. I've been here for going on 3 years.
But so you got picked up by New Jersey at the end of the 1920 season.
Going into the 20 season, so going into the year that where COVID happened. So I started in just before training camp, so
Okay.
kind of September
of 2019.
Yeah, September of 19, and we got more or less halfway through that season, and then kind of the world stopped, and yeah, so it was a pretty wild experience there, kind of going through that. Yeah.
Well, aside from the COVID, because I think we talked to death about COVID and the bubble and all that, but what was it like? I mean, just your first day experience going in September. Did you feel like, oh my gosh, this is my dream job? This is, I can't believe I'm here kind of thing, pinching yourself, or was it going, yeah, okay, I'm in my element?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of both, to be honest with you. It was my role was different. So there was, anytime you change jobs and you're doing something slightly different, or, there's you go in kind of wide-eyed for sure, but it was always where I wanted to be. And my professional goal is always to work in the National Hockey League. So, day one was very much, pinch myself a little bit, but at the same time, confident with what I was doing. And they had created a position, not for me, but they had created a new position. And I was one of the obviously lucky couple people that got to interview for that. And fortunate to know several people in the organization, so I wasn't going in blind. I knew some of the people that I was going to work with as I got there. And but yeah, it's the college setting and the professional setting are very different. So that year was quite a whirlwind, just sort of getting my feet under me and kind of learning the ropes and just how that culture works. It's just it's a different setting. So but yeah, day one was exciting, that's for sure.
And how did it come to play that you left Jersey for the Coyotes?
Yeah, again, just I guess right place, right time. As my career has kind of morphed over time, I've gone from being a performance coach or strength and conditioning coach to kind of a performance coach and sports scientist to a sports scientist to now a performance director. And as my career started, as I started at Mike Boyle's or at Stanford, the idea of a performance director in North American sport didn't even really exist. Sports science was, almost didn't exist and was very new. And so as I progressed through my career, and these new types of roles and new concepts kind of came to the forefront, I would look at the landscape and say, wow, that what I sort of picture what this performance director idea is, like, I think that's kind of where I want to go as my career progresses. So as I was in New Jersey, my role there was director of performance science and reconditioning coach. So my role was really very much to handle the sports science side of things in the organization, and then to assist with strength and conditioning on a day-to-day basis, and kind of be the return to play middle ground person between rehab and performance. But at that point in time, I knew that ultimately I kind of wanted to lead a department and move into this performance director role. And the Coyotes happened to have an ownership and management change, and had just changed a lot of pieces within the organization. And one of the things they identified that they wanted to bring to the forefront was sports science, and to have a performance director. And yeah, it was just a timing piece. So I loved my time in New Jersey. I was in no rush to leave there, but they had reached out to our people in New Jersey and kind of identified that I might be somebody with the right kind of skill set and the right timing, and that's how I ended up here.
Well, how did you get intrigued by sports science? Like, what were the elements? There must have been some things, because we're talking a very young, burgeoning department or aspect of strength conditioning that it wasn't around. So you are really one of the lead figures, if you will, that is just leading the charge with sports science, because you didn't have many people's shoulders to stand upon because it was so young. What were the elements that you're just like, oh man, I dig this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, sports science and strength and conditioning, to me, it's funny that in some ways they're seen as separate entities. To me, it's the same thing. And I say that because my progress into the sports science realm was very organic. I'm an inquisitive person, so I want to know why. So when I had questions about, what was happening with my athletes physiologically, why was this happening? How can we measure this? It wasn't in an attempt to, go into quote unquote sports science. It was to ask questions and to figure out what was going on. And the tools and technologies that sort of are part of what we think of as sports science were just, sometimes I use a kettlebell in the gym, sometimes I use heart rate monitors. They're just tools to me. But they're looked at maybe differently. So that was literally, I guess, how I started going down this path of sports science. Was I wanted to know, this is when I kind of started at Stanford, but really at Umass Lowell, I wanted to better understand the cardiovascular and physiological demands of my players. I wanted to understand the heart rate response and the adaptation to practice, to games, what that looked like. And so I was able to, get a team heart rate system to start to answer those questions or ask those questions and try to figure those things out. And one thing led to another thing. And that's really what, to me, sports science is all about, is asking questions. And you never really come to an answer. What you come to is another question. And so that, maybe that led into using force plates, and then force plates has led into using, resisted sprinting tools, and resisted sprinting tools have led into, asking questions about accelerations and decelerations. And so now using GPS type tools. And so, I've kind of moved or morphed into this sports science realm, but it's really just about trying to better understand what's going on with our athletes and what the actual demands of the game are, and how we can better prepare our athletes for the demands of the game.
Very cool. Now, other thing that's very cool and that I really dig is the return to play aspect. And in New Jersey, being that part of your title, I would love to get a better understanding of what that really means in regards to return to play. What markers or indicators from a physiological standpoint, understanding we're talking that this is a business, so you're going to have certain expectations or pressures from above that this player needs to get back on the ice as quickly as possible. But and albeit hopefully in a very safe manner where this won't be a recurring problem, and that our star player is now going to be shipped off to Buffalo or wherever because he's constantly getting injured. I mean, what is return to play? Give me a whole kind of understanding of what did that mean to you?
Yeah, I think to me, it's this sort of gray area between kind of acute injury, acute rehab, and full performance and competition. And it's this middle ground that kind of exists a lot of times between athletic training and again a sort of acute physical therapy where an athlete is early in an injury rehab process, and the focus is very much on tissue healing and the specific injury site, and it's really about sort of fixing the broken thing, whatever that may be. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got your performance training, your strength and conditioning, your competition, where especially at the professional level, the idea is really to optimize the athlete to perform almost every other day in hockey. And so it's this middle ground where, okay, the athlete is coming out of the acute injury stage. There's certainly a fair amount of time away from being able to perform at the elite level, but they can do a lot more than just acute rehabilitation of the injury site. So it's the first sort of layer of this gray area is working with the rehab professionals to say, okay, that maybe they're still focused on rehabilitation of whatever it may be, the high ankle sprain, but we've got a whole athlete here that's got two healthy arms and one healthy leg, and everything else is fine, and we want to keep this athlete at as high a functioning level as possible to minimize the time that they're away. So as that injury heals and that they're the rehab professionals are getting that back to baseline, the athlete isn't losing too much ground, and then we keep moving down this continuum, and now they're pretty much quote unquote healthy from an injury perspective. That injury mechanism is mostly healed, but now it's been X amount of time since they've been out of this high level performance, so they're not quite ready to just hop back into NHL hockey. Like that's a massive jump, and so now it's really about sort of trying to ramp them up physiologically, and at the same time, depending on how long this injury process is taking, I want to look at this time as, hey, can we spend time here improving you? If upper body strength is something that could be improved, and we've got a 6-week sort of window, well, let's improve upper body strength. So when you get back to performance, you're actually in a lot of ways, you're better than you were when you came out. And then it's really about integrating, again, we continue to move down this continuum towards performance. It's integrating back into practice and back onto the ice. And this is where I really use our sports science information to understand, well, what was baseline? What was this athlete's power output baseline on force plates in training camp when they were healthy? Can we say reliably that their ability to generate force or to absorb force or whatever it may be on force plates, is that close to back to normal? Are we comfortable? And then we get them on the ice, and can we get back up to max speed and max velocity, and can we replicate the loading that occurs in a game or in a practice if we have information from baselines? And so the idea is to try to ramp them back in a safe manner, but also as quickly as possible, and get them back to where they were physiologically before they were hurt, so that they can get back into the lineup as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I see this as, obviously it's like passing on a baton, right? But there are those moments where batons get dropped, where the reach is just not connected. And you actually describe it really quite well in that gray zone, where the acute is really focused on the symptomatic site, and the strength component, the strength conditioning end of the spectrum, is really all about integrated full body power production, endurance, strength, and whatnot. And there must be a moment in this spectrum where there is a release from one and a picking up of another. And it's in that space in between that seems that is the crux of the issue often, is that is there truly this understanding between the two of how to mesh the acute isolated symptom area into a more integrated fashion. Do you know what I'm trying to say? It's like,
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to describe it. It is this sort of meshing of, these two, related but separate entities, performance and rehabilitation, and it's this messy gray area, but it needs to be messy and gray because I think where people can get into trouble is when it's just a complete distinction between one and the other, and we move from rehabilitation and maybe the surgeon says, well, that the ACL is now healed and it's been X number of months, and so this athlete is cleared. And then if you don't have middle gray area and you just say, okay, go back and play ice hockey, whoa, like you are not anywhere near ready holistically to play at this level, to compete, to do these things. Just because that injury site is healed doesn't mean you're up to par from a performance perspective. So if you don't have this sort of middle ground area that meshes these two worlds, then you get into a lot of trouble with just these black and white distinctions, not cleared or cleared. And it's like, well, to me, there's a lot of gray area in there, and it's an important distinction.
And there needs, I would say needs to be, it would be a nice idea if there was some elements of assessments for that gray area itself, because there's plenty of assessments for the acute, and with the athletic trainer and the physical therapist, they can test and assess until the cows come home. And the same holds true for the strength professional, where there's plenty of RM testing and VBT and everything else to assess the athlete there. But that gray zone, I guess I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you start developing assessments for the gray zone, or is that something that's still needs to be kind of sussed out?
Well, to me, they're not. We have assessments, but they're not. I don't think they're different from one to the other. We'll use the tools that we have. Obviously, each professional is going to have their unique skill set, right? Your athletic trainers are going to be, very adept at their manual muscle testing and their hands-on skills, and our physical therapists as well. And like you said, our strength and conditioning professionals are going to be really good at, force and power output and traditional kind of gym-based metrics. I think that where sports science can lend a hand is it fits in all of these areas. We can have an athlete, again, we utilize force plates a lot. We can utilize force plates all the way through this process, where if we know what an athlete's baseline metrics look like when they're healthy, jumping on a force plate, we can start, at an appropriate time in the rehabilitation, part of the continuum, doing, low level jumping, or maybe even regressed. And it's just, body weight squatting and just looking at asymmetries. And as that athlete is progressing, we're getting further and further along the lines, more towards performance outputs, where we're still utilizing the tool, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And we're assessing, we're looking at, okay, is there, braking ability, the ability to kind of absorb force, is that improving over time as this injury mechanism is healing and is improving? And then how close are we getting to what their original baseline is? And then same thing when we're on the ice and we're able to use some of our our heart rate monitoring, so we can understand physiologically where are they at, and our GPS metrics, so we can see are they able to sort of handle and withstand getting to X percentage of max velocity, and then how do they handle that in the recovery period the next day, and then progressing. So it's this blend of art and science of using the tools to understand where you're at, and then the art is understanding how to manipulate the variables that we would use in performance or rehabilitation, and volume and intensity and duration and all of these things. And so to me it's using these tools. It's not separate assessments per se, but it's having your key performance indicators well identified and using those as benchmarks as you progress through the return to play process.
Makes complete sense. So when we're talking about injuries, like what are the most common injuries that you have a tendency to deal with from 1 week to the next?
Yeah, from a soft tissue non-contact injury in hockey, it's a lot of growing hip flexor, lower abdominal, pelvic area stuff. High ankle sprains can be a nasty one in hockey that occurs more often than we'd like. AC joint stuff happens a lot. You've got large humans moving at 20 miles an hour running into each other, and the immovable object that is the boards. So stuff tends to break and give sometimes. If you're having a tough year, you get a lot of broken fingers, broken feet from blocking shots and things like that. So those are some of the contact and non-contact stuff. And obviously there's not a lot you can do about the contact stuff, but we try to really develop our program to minimize and reduce the incidence of injury with the non-contact stuff. So hip, core, growing is rehabilitation, I guess, is really important for us.
So with sports science also is the advancement of equipment, I imagine too. Like you just mentioned, there's not much you can do about impacts and contact injuries, but you are in a way starting to, with the utilization of technology, the equipment is getting more and more advanced. Are there some things that are in the process to help with the broken feet or the broken fingers, or is it just where we are right now?
Yeah, not so much sort of on our plate within the organization, but that's something that all the big equipment manufacturers, I think, do a really good job of research and development around these things. Players wear, protective. Some players wear protective equipment over their skates, as an example, called shot blockers. Literally to reduce the impact of, if they're blocking a shot with their foot, and same thing with gloves and the type of material. So that the equipment manufacturers are constantly evolving and trying to, improve things. But the reality is, like I said, it's, at the NHL level, your average size is, 6'1", 210. Guys can skate 25 miles an hour, can shoot a vulcanized frozen puck 100 miles an hour. Sometimes there's only so much you can do when those things collide.
And in your position, are the manufacturers coming to you, or they go directly to the players? How does that work?
They don't come necessarily to me. I think more so NHL teams have equipment staffs of 4 or 5 equipment managers, and they work hand in hand a lot of times with the equipment manufacturers to say, well, these are the types of issues that we're seeing, and these are the problems that we're having. And so I think it's more kind of on that side of the table.
And in your position with the Arizona Coyotes, what are your biggest challenges in the position that you hold?
Biggest challenges. I think for anybody that works in this setting, the schedule is the biggest challenge. You can't change it, but we play almost every other day in the National Hockey League when you kind of work out the math. We have some unique challenges this year with our organization, being sort of in flux with our location. So we have, if you don't know a lot about our team, so we left our arena at the end of the last year that we'd been at for the last 15 or 20 years, and we are now fortunate enough to share arena space with the Arizona State University. Just built a new hockey arena, so we're utilizing their arena for games. But the timing of that was such, and the timing of that facility being finished was such, that we're essentially on the road for the first half of the season. So as we talk right now, we're at the tail end of a 15-day road trip. To start the year, our entire preseason was on the road. We'll be home for about a week, and then we'll be out for another 20 days. So almost our entire first half of the year is on the road. So from a challenges standpoint, keeping the athletes trained well, healthy, strong, fit, all of those pieces that go into performance, almost fully on the road away from our own facilities. That's a really big challenge for us this year, and presents some unique hurdles to try to overcome.
I can only imagine. I mean, that's tremendous. I mean, just different time zones obviously are what professional players are going to have to deal with regardless. But to not be settled and to be home is a huge part of that. So I don't even know where to go with that. I mean, that's a huge a huge challenge. How do you deal with that? I guess that would be my question. Like, what kind of strategies are you using to keep the team a team, to keep the injuries low, to keep the home fires burning in a way?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a job for one person, right? It's everybody. Everybody's involved, from how we're scheduling things, where, what cities we stay in, if we can, longer than others, and how we travel. um from a scheduling standpoint, and kind of a load monitoring standpoint, which days we try to schedule as day off, or harder, higher intensity days or lower intensity days. And then a lot of flexibility and creativity. We have to continue to train, and we kind of take a micro dosing approach. I know it's sort of a cliche kind of word at this point, but our philosophy from a training perspective is we kind of basically train every day. And the intensities and things like that, and the theme of the day is going to change. But so we try to have touch points with the athletes, every day that we're a scheduled day at the rink. But the flexibility and creativity around that is that every NHL arena or practice rink that we're in is set up differently, and we have access to the same type of equipment at every NHL arena. Every team has to provide basically this road cart setup that has some power block dumbbells and Swiss balls and some kettlebells, and everybody's outfitted the same way. But some places have some more equipment, some places have a little bit less. So, when you get to wherever you get to, and you have a scheduled, strength day or force output day post game, if you're lucky enough to have access to, a trap bar and some extra plates, you use that if you don't have access to that somewhere else. So you got to be really flexible and creative about how you apply the right type of stress at the right time, with limited equipment and limited gym space, and all of the again, the things that are part of the life of being on the road in the NHL.
Now, aside from all your travels, you've been writing as well. You've come out with a book recently, and I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, co-authored a book a couple years ago now called Intent: Practical Application for Sports Science. The idea behind it, and what the book is really about is being able to apply the concepts of sports science regardless of budget level. I kind of again, kind of my journey through this started tinkering in the quote unquote sports science world with, not a big budget, not really fancy equipment, utilizing, jump mats to measure vertical jump and things like that. So the book kind of takes you through different concepts in sports science, load monitoring, power output, things like that, all the things that a sports science would be able to measure and kind of dig into. But if you're at the high school or private setting, budget level, and you don't have a lot of money, what are tools you can utilize to measure these types of things from this, in this principle? And then, if you're at the professional level, what are the Cadillac of tools in that space? And so the book is all about talking about teaching the sort of principles of sports science, but being able to apply that regardless of your setting.
Very cool. And with this, I imagine you've got yourself a little bit of a speaking gig from time to time over the last couple of years. Where do you like to present, if you are enjoying presenting?
Yeah, I love presenting when I get the opportunity. I've been fortunate to talk all over all over North America, and from NSCA, local events to national events, and different things like that. So whenever I get the opportunity, it's a little tougher in the NHL now with our schedules to get away and do that. But whenever I do get the chance, I try to get out there, and it's always fun interacting with a group. And I like to talk shop. So if I could talk shop with a big group, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now, you yourself, competitive hockey player, you're in the net. And I was listening to a podcast you were on not too long ago, where you were saying that you have been asked to be in the net, to be like the third string goalkeeper during practice, not during a game, obviously, but that must be fun.
Yeah, it's happened a few times. I'm getting, maybe body's not handling that as well as it used to when I was younger, but occasionally, we teams typically carry 2 goalies. So if a goalie, one of the guys just really needs a rest day, or comes down with the flu or something, and I happen to have my gear at the rink, sometimes I'll get the tap on the shoulder and go out there and get hit by pucks, and the guys have a good time because they get to score a lot of goals and have a good laugh at me. So every once in a while I get out there. It's pretty fun.
Oh, very cool. And I gotta say, I'm wondering. You seem somewhat mild mannered. You're very kind of at ease and relaxed, but you have lived in some extreme areas. Growing up in Seattle, where the sun shines maybe 30 days out of the year, and it's mainly rain forest area, to go into the Northeast, where you can hear the crackling of the moisture inside your nostrils when you just wrinkle your nose in the midst of winter, to being now in Arizona where the sun never sets. I mean, it's pretty much a bake session there. What first, what's that like, going from all these extreme kind of environments? And do you find yourself kind of latching on to the activities in those regions? Because you strike me as a very active kind of guy.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to get to live in some pretty cool places. Like you said, growing up in Seattle and then Boston area, and spent some time in the Bay Area. It's just beautiful. And just outside New York City when I was in New Jersey, and now I'm in, the Phoenix area where it's 120 degrees in the summer. Yeah, I do. I enjoy, me and my family like to get outdoors and do things, and every place is different. So you try to become a local and kind of enjoy the things that come naturally. So it's, in Arizona, it's great. This time of year is absolutely beautiful, and you can go, mountain biking and trail running and stuff like that, and golf all year round. So getting outside is a blast. And yeah, during the summer, it's unique when it's that hot. It's extreme. So it poses some different opportunities, I'll say, but it's been a lot of fun. Gotten to see a lot of different things and experience some different things, and it's been a wild ride so far.
And as the ride continues with your title and your position with the Coyotes, it seems like, I'm not going to say you have like the golden ticket necessarily, but you have opportunity to be very creative and look into different aspects of strength conditioning, as well as just high performance. What areas are you looking toward? What is giving you some excitement? What is inspiring you? What are there different fields of study, whether it's the mental skills or the rehabilitation portions? Where do your eyes like to kind of direct themselves?
Yeah, I mean, you name a couple right there that I think the mental skills and sports psychology side of things, I think, is hugely underutilized in sport in general. I think there's a lot of potential room for growth kind of in that area. I'm fortunate in our organization. We're very progressive and forward thinking, and we're in the midst of an exciting rebuild period where there's a lot of change happening and a lot of growth, and so I think all of those areas we're able to, I was able to bring on a full-time dietitian, which is a pretty unique role in the National Hockey League. I brought him on last year and really been able to kind of upgrade that area. So I'm always kind of on the lookout for what's the next area to improve upon, and looking outside of sport and outside of hockey to try to learn and see what other people are doing, to see where can we maybe influence our athletes and our staff and our team in positive ways. So it's those are areas that I'm definitely looking at.
Are you saying that not every NHL team has a performance dietitian?
No, it's quite rare. Certainly not a full time. I think there's, excuse me. I think probably half the league has, somebody on staff as a dietitian in a consultancy role or a part time role. There's only a handful that I'm aware of that are full time. Our dietitian travels full time with us, which I think is even more rare. So that's an area for sure that at least right now I think is a competitive advantage for our athletes. We're able to do some unique things there. But yeah, room for growth for sure.
My gosh, that just blows me away, Devan. That really does. I've just got to say it. Like, all as professionals, we know that fueling the engine with the proper fuel is going to create optimal performance. And yet there is continuously this disconnect. It's like we should, in America, when it comes time for like going out on a date, where are you going to go for the finest restaurant? It should be at your local hospital, right? That's where some of the best nutrition should be found. But of course, it's not. Like, I don't think anyone would say, hey, let's go over to our local hospital and get some food, because we know what the cafeteria is going to look like. It's just heinous. And yet it seems to trickle down into professional sports. I mean, that honestly just blows me away that not every team has a performance dietitian or nutritionist or just helping to fuel their athletes in the proper direction. So honestly, I don't know if there's even a question there, but more of a commentary. I'm just glad to hear that you guys are being progressive with that. And how does that work with the dietitian and yourself? How do you bring in your knowledge to them, or vice versa? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, well, first to kind of comment on your comment, hockey, I think of all the professional sports in North America, maybe the furthest behind in a lot of areas. It's still a very old school sport, traditional based sport. So these are, these types of roles are growing. Certainly my role as a high performance director is pretty new in the NHL, but we're seeing a lot of people, a lot of organizations, creating these roles. So it's certainly growing and progressing. But when it comes to my interaction with, our dietitian or our strength and conditioning staff or our rehabilitation staff, that the high performance director part of my job is really managing the group, creating this umbrella for everybody to work under. And really it's about, helping them do the best job that they can do. My job is really to create some vision around where we're trying to go and a little bit of a North Star, and then get out of their way, hopefully hire good people and get out of their way, let them do their job, and then facilitate what they do. That's a lot of what my job is when it comes to that, is trying to facilitate and help them do what they need to do. So when it comes to our dietitian, it's making sure that he's able to utilize his skill set as best he can, and help him do the things that he needs to do to interact with our athletes and influence what they're eating and bring in the right types of foods. And so that's really what being a performance director is all about, at least in our organization.
And is there a department that is new or you're looking to create or tap into? I mean, we've mentioned diet and nutrition, you've mentioned athletic training, physical therapy, and of course, strength coaches. And we've talked about mental skills. So do you have a specialist for, say, mental skills or another department or element that I haven't mentioned?
Yeah, that's an area that's probably underdeveloped at this point. And I think, we're fortunate to have somebody on staff that works with a lot of our prospects, and is, involved in, the draft process and things like that. But I think it's an area, again, hockey being a very sort of traditional sport, it's not a role that exists on a day-to-day basis a lot of places. So I think that's certainly something for the future to look at.
I'm excited for you because you've just got yourself a blackboard that you can start to create a lot of different combinations and for success. Tell me though, high performance director, that title, how many other teams have high performance directors in the NHL?
Yeah, there's probably that title or something similar. Semantics, can play a role in what people are called, but I think there's probably a third of the league maybe that's got somebody that's sort of dedicated into that role or that position. So again, 5 years ago there might not have been any. Now we're up to kind of a third. So as things progress, as the sport moves forward and naturally, organically kind of progresses forward, I think these types of roles will be important because there's just, we're recognizing all of these different entities and individuals and departments that can be beneficial. But you need somebody to be able to sort of collect everybody and bring everybody together and, like I said, facilitate. So that's really what the role is about. And as staffs grow, I think you'll see more and more of these types of positions.
Fantastic. And then for you personally and professionally speaking, like moving off into the future, you've been there for a few years now. I imagine that if the management stays the same and ownership stays the same, you're pretty solid there, provided they have themselves really good winning records and so on. But 5-10 years down the road or something, as you progress and learn more, is there other directions that you can see yourself going in?
You know what? I'm really excited to see where this organization grows and where we get to. There's a lot of excitement on the horizon. Building a new state-of-the-art arena in a few years, and like I said, we're very much in the sort of retooling process right now. And so we've been able to draft some fantastic young players last year, and there's going to be a great opportunity this year to draft some, potentially a couple of players that are, absolute generational talents. So if we're fortunate enough to end up in those seats, I'm excited to see where we can continue to grow this organization, where we get to the next 5 or 10 years.
Very cool. And when it comes to the fan base, I mean, being a Sharks fan here and going over to the Shark Tank in San Jose, it's amazing how big of a Sharks community, a fan base is here in the Bay Area. I was kind of really surprised when I moved here about 30 years ago to find that it's just huge. It's maybe not as huge as the Bruins, but darn close. What is it like in Arizona?
Yeah, it's exciting, especially with our move. We've, if you know the region at all, we've moved basically from the west side of town to the east side of town. And it's just we're near Arizona State University, and it's an exciting area. And so a lot of our fan base is more in that part of the area of the city. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time right now, and we're looking forward to seeing what things look like when we do get off the road and get home.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you could really use a nice home cooked meal pretty soon. But this has been a great conversation, Devin. I really appreciate it. And I know you're in between games and you made time in your hectic schedule for us to have a conversation. So I'm very grateful and appreciative of this. And I honestly can't wait to see where the Coyotes go this season. We're just underway, and I just want to say thank you.
Well, this was a blast. I appreciate getting on with you and talking shop, and glad we could find a couple minutes to make it work with both our schedules. But yeah, again, thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a blast.
Right on.
And that's a wrap for another episode of the Zealous Podcast. I want to thank Devin for coming on, as well as the Arizona Coyotes organization for allowing him to share what he did. And hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I do. Make sure you come back. It's every Monday morning, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, for another episode of the Zealous Podcast. Until then, tell others, leave a comment, and we'll see you next week.